The average amount of time between two recessions is 4.8 years. That's using data going back to 1854. Now, the last US recession that we've had was in April of 2020. That was exactly 4 years and 10 months ago. So 4.8 years. So the US economy should be right on track for another recession, right? Historically, GDP, so that's the size of the US economy, goes up over the long run. At least that's been the case for the last 80 years. And about every 5 years, a contraction in the size of the economy occurs. That's what these gray recession bars represent. They're the official NBER recessions. Now, over the long run, these contractions really don't look that bad. But zooming in, for example, on the 2008 financial crisis, we know that these temporary contractions can have absolutely devastating consequences on people's lives. And of course, as traders, we also need to be paying attention to them. Overlaying the S&P 500, we know that pretty much all of the significant market declines that have occurred throughout recent financial history have happened during these economic contractions. Now, everybody thinks that they know when the next recession is going to occur. A lot of people have been anticipating one to occur over the last year, and as a result, sitting out on one of the largest stock market rallies we've seen in history. Now, although it's impossible to know for sure when the next recession is going to occur, there are tools that we can use to understand how likely it is that one will occur. And that's what we're going to be looking at in this video. By the way, I want to remind you guys that we're doing a competition with our members at Bravos Research to guess the quarterly close of the S&P 500. We're giving away big cash prizes to the best guesses, and at the same time, we're doing a big discount on our service for this event. There's a limited number of spots to participate, so don't waste your time. Now, although the average time between two recessions is 4.8 years using data going back to 1854, if we only use data after the Second World War, the average time between two recessions is actually 5.9 years. And if we use data starting from 1982, which you could say was a more comparable economy to the one we have today, that number gets stretched to 8.8 years. So that would potentially put the next recession at 2028, which would probably make people that are uninvested in today's stock market regret their decision, as the performance of the S&P 500 could be very strong if a recession doesn't occur until 2028. Of course, recessions don't just happen because it's been too long since the last one. They occur because certain conditions are in place in order for them to happen. And one of them can be seen on this chart right here. This is a chart that shows us housing activity in the United States, showing us the number of homes that are being sold in the US going back to the 1970s. The vast majority of the time, the number of houses being sold is going up. But sometimes housing activity drops. And the vast majority of the times where that has happened in history, we've seen an economic recession follow shortly afterwards. So declining activity in the housing market predicts economic recession. The reason for this is that housing reflects one of the most important purchases in people's lives, something that most people put as a top priority in terms of purchases. If all of a sudden people are no longer buying homes, it suggests that the consumer is becoming weaker. If he's already unable to buy a home, it's unlikely that he'll be significantly increasing his spending in other areas of his life. And as we know, less spending translates into lower economic activity and can possibly cause a recession. This is why the larger drops in housing activity, like in 1982 and 2008, have preceded some of the most severe economic recessions in recent financial history. In fact, if we overlay the US unemployment rate on top, you see that 1982 saw some of the highest rates of unemployment in US history, and the same thing goes for the 2008 financial crisis. Now, you may have noticed that housing activity also dropped considerably between 2022 and 2023. In fact, dropping to the lowest level since the bottom of the housing market in 2008. This is one of those recession conditions that we were talking about at the beginning of this video. If it was only up to the housing market, we would probably be in a deep recession right now, with the unemployment rate at much higher levels. In fact, if we go one step further and flip the unemployment rate around, we see that the housing market weakens about a year and a half before the unemployment rate begins to rise. So again, the housing market seems to predict what the rest of the economy is going to do. In fact, if we shift forward the housing market data by a year and a half, we see that it's almost a perfect match with the unemployment rate. This is one of the key reasons for why we believed that the odds of a recession were elevated in 2024. We have seen the unemployment rate tick up a little bit, but again, that hasn't been enough for a recession to occur. And right now, we're left with this massive gap between the housing market that's at 2008 levels and the unemployment rate that has stayed pretty steady. So which way is this chart going to resolve? Are we going to see the labor market catch down to the housing market that's at 2008 levels? Or are we going to see the housing market recover and lead to a very stable unemployment rate with the economy avoiding a recession? Now, I know exactly what many of you are thinking right now. There's absolutely no way that the housing market can recover today. The housing market is the most unaffordable it's been in decades of data. This is a chart showing the average mortgage payment as a percentage of the average income. The average mortgage payment today is 40% of the average household income. This is the most expensive mortgages have been in over 30 years. And it means that about 70% of Americans today cannot afford a mortgage on a house if they stick to the rule that mortgage payments should not exceed a third of your income. So how on earth could the housing market recover with so many people not being able to afford a home? Well, sadly, the answer lies in the other 30%, or even worse, in just the top 10% of the population. This is how the net worth of the top 10% of the population has evolved since 2010. It's grown by about 200%. Now, compare that to how the net worth of the bottom 50% of the population has evolved since 2010, and you quickly get the picture. We have an absolutely massive divergence between the two, and that divergence explains exactly why we think the housing market can absolutely recover here, possibly making the US avoid a recession. Of course, it remains to be seen whether the economy can be held up by just the top portion of the population. When we look at consumer spending divided by income quintiles, we do see that the top two quintiles currently make up over 50% of spending. That has certainly made the economy avoid a recession over the last couple of years, despite the majority of the population feeling like they're doing worse. This possible recovery in the housing market is something that we're looking to bet on at Bravos Research in 2025. We intend on getting exposure to this through real estate investment funds or REITs. While in 2024 we've benefited greatly from our trades on gold and US stocks, getting a total of 85 winning trades with an average profit of 16.65% gain per trade, we think 2025 will be the year where real estate potentially explodes higher, and we expect to have a lot of trades on the housing market this year. If you want to follow all of our trades, make sure to take advantage of the discount that we're doing and also get a chance to compete on our event.